Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today I wonder what we're going to talk about. Probably Project Highland. It is finally here. The updated Model 3 has arrived. Tesla's released this. They've given some press tours as well, some videos coming out from the likes of CarWow, some other channels. So we'll go through what we know so far, but it looked like the rumors largely turned out to be true. As we can see, we've got an updated front fascia here, front fascia. We've got a number of different updates. We're going to go through some of the new photos that we've got, the design studio, things like that. And then I have summarized everything that I've found out that is different so far. These are going to keep coming in. We're going to keep learning more, but it's been a couple hours now, so I think we've got a decent handle on things so far. So right off the bat, here it is. The leak that we had probably a couple months back of this front fascia looked pretty similar to what we're seeing now. I think a lot of the rumors have been correct, including obviously the date of September 1st being the release date for China, since of course it is already that day there now. But let's just look at some of the updates here. So, I mean, you can see right away, rear screen, I think the vehicle looks really great. The taillights are updated, obviously the headlights as well. So from the leaks that we had previously seen, we knew there weren't going to be any major changes to sort of the construction of the vehicle because, we've seen the sides have not been covered. So we kind of knew that going into it. Obviously, Tesla has a pretty, consistent interior theme. So we knew a little bit of what to expect there as well, but there are a lot of changes. As we can see, the LED lighting, there are a lot of changes under the hood here, and I'm excited to kind of walk through those. So from the videos that we have seen so far, let me just go in, we can see some real life shots. Again, Tesla held a press event, which isn't it kind of a nice change for Tesla. They tend to not really do those things, but it looked like they, in this case did, getting some early access to reviewers to be able to post these videos. And although it's not necessarily advertising, it is definitely a type of promotion that Tesla has not done before. So again, I think it looks great. We can see the reaction so far, I think seems to be quite positive. Seems to be a little bit more of a sporty look than what we had before with the Model 3. You can see the updated headlights here. I think those look great. Updated taillights. What's interesting about the taillights, and I think this is going to help Tesla from a manufacturability standpoint, which is probably the reason behind a lot of the updates that we're seeing. With the taillights, these are now integrated. Before they were split, so you'd have the trunk line splitting up the taillights, which, if you have any manufacturing issues in terms of tolerances, could put things out of whack. You might see more panel gaps in a construction like this. This is now all integrated with the trunk, so if the trunk opens up, the entire taillight comes up with it. So I think that's going to make things a lot easier for Tesla from, again, a manufacturability standpoint, which obviously helps costs. Here we get a look at the interior. So obviously pretty similar overall, but we've got a new redesigned dash. We've got ambient LED lighting. This kind of gives us a hint too at the Cybertruck lighting that we had talked about a couple of days ago that we had seen in that Raising Cane's drive-through shot. So I'm imagining that that's probably very similar to what we're seeing now in the Model 3. This LED lighting, of course, is editable. So one of the reviews from automoto.it, although in Italian here we can see this is selectable, so you can change. You can see green here versus the blue in some of these other shots. So any color that you want to select for those LEDs is optional, and I would imagine you could probably also turn them off if that is not your style. As we can see with the front seats, these are now perforated, so that rumor also turned out to be correct. With this perforation, this does allow Tesla to offer ventilated front seats in the front of the Model 3. So that's going to be a really nice update for people. Of course, that's a feature that the Model S and X have exclusively right now, and that's going to make its way over to the Model 3. The rear seats are also perforated. However, it doesn't sound like they are ventilated, just perforated, so it kind of gives it a little bit of a more elevated or luxurious, I think, look and feel. But again, no ventilation, at least to my knowledge, on the rear seats. The rear, though, it is getting an updated, or it's getting an additional screen. So like we see in the S and the X, now adding that 8-inch center screen in the rear seats. So this is going to be really interesting. You control media, control the climate control, everything like that, which will be really nice for rear passengers. And there's another interesting feature that we'll talk about there in a second. Front trunk and trunk, they seem to be pretty much identical. We can see here again from Automoto, the front trunk open. Looks pretty similar, maybe some minor changes, but overall very similar in terms of the construction there. So I want to go through just, again, a list of all the features. We'll talk a little bit about pricing, performance, and things like that in this section because there are significant updates there as well. So just to kind of recap and highlight some of the things that we haven't talked about yet in terms of new features. So exterior, New colors, we're getting ultra red now brought over to the Model 3. In addition, extending now from the Model S and X, which recently updated to ultra red, so replacing the current red. Stealth gray looks like that's replacing Midnight Silver Metallic. To me, it's looking pretty similar. I don't know what the exact updates are. It looked like maybe it was a little bit, shinier for lack of a better word, but we'll see on that. New fascia, headlights, taillights, we talked about that. The Tesla word mark on the back, so let's see if we can find the interior or the rear shot here. So instead of the Tesla T, you now have the word mark back there, which, we have seen Franz's Model 3 look like that in the past. So Tesla bringing that design over here to the updated Project Highland Model 3. We do have new wheels. So you can see they are pretty similar. They're called the Nova wheels, these ones. And then I can't remember the name of the Aero wheels, but pretty similar to what we're seeing, just minor updates on the wheels. The dimensions have changed very slightly. The vehicle is 1 inch longer and also 1 inch shorter, both of which should give it a little bit more of a sportier look. Interior, of course, new dash, LED lighting, we talked about that. As you may have seen, no stocks on the interior, if I can find that shot. So something that a lot of people are probably going to be a little bit disappointed in, but again, that's going to help Tesla from a manufacturability and a cost perspective. How big of a savings that is, I don't know. But Tesla moving forward with that, and I believe that will now probably make its way over to all the vehicles following that style change for the S and the X. In terms of the interior, they also say that there is improved material quality throughout, and that is leading to 30% improvement in wind and ambient noise, a 20% improvement in impact noise, and a 20% improvement in road noise. They also mentioned that the acoustic glass that Tesla has talked about before, if you want to call it double pane, it's not technically double pane, but that's how a lot of people have referred to it. That glass is now in all windows or all exterior glass for the Model 3. Potentially, maybe not the windshield. I can't quite remember on that one, but they've added that sort of quote unquote acoustic glass or expanded it in terms of where it is at now. So that should help with these improvements here. The screen, although it is the same size screen, it's a new screen that is brighter, more responsive. There is a slimmer bezel, which is nice because, if you go out and you look at your Tesla, if you got one, those bezels were pretty big. Obviously, those displays were from back in 2017, 2018, and I don't really know if we've seen an update, at least in terms of the bezel size, since then. But otherwise, same screen dimensions and same processor. Ventilated front seats, we talked about that, preferred rear seats. The ventilation system has been upgraded, so of course the dash looks a little bit different now than it did before. I'm having trouble finding that one every time. This isn't a great shot of it, but we'll look at another shot here in a second. But the dash is updated. Again, it looks like something that is probably a little bit easier to manufacture, probably driving a lot of these decisions for Tesla. They also changed the climate control a little bit, and some people are going to really appreciate this. Before, you weren't able to actually turn off the fan on one side of the vehicle versus the other. So if the passenger didn't want the fan on for climate control and the driver did, or you wanted them at different powers, those can now be adjusted. You can turn one side off, one side on, etc. So that's going to be a nice change for people. They've also improved the microphones in the vehicle, and it sounds like there are now 2, one over the passenger side, one over the driver's side. I gotta double check that, but they've improved that, which should help for voice calls being made in the vehicle. So that's really nice. They've also increased the speaker count, at least for the long range version. I think the rear wheel drive only has 9 speakers, but the long range version now has 17 speakers, up from 14 previously. I think that additional speaker sits somewhere up here if I remember correctly, and then I'm not sure on the other additional 2. The rear screen, we talked about that has been added, but the additional kind of interesting feature, the rear screen will actually allow you to move the front seats forward if those are unoccupied. So imagine if you're sitting back right of the vehicle, if you're in left-hand drive country, if you're sitting in that seat, no one's in the front seat, you can use the rear screen to slide that seat forward if that's a little bit more comfortable. So not probably a feature that a ton of people are going to use, but something that is really nice if you do want to use it. CarWow did also mention that the rear seats are more reclined. So, pretty big list here of changes, even though largely still looks like the same, similar Model 3 with sort of a new, updated look. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. And I'm sure although these aren't all being mentioned or talked about, even within the vehicle, there's probably a much, much longer list of things that are being updated. All right, so let's talk about performance and pricing. So in terms of performance, CarWow did mention that there is an upgraded suspension on this vehicle. There wasn't any specific mention of castings, front or rear. We did expect that. I think a lot of people expected that for Project Highland to kind of bring that up to date with the Model Y, which of course uses those castings. But no sign of that yet. If we look at the render that is available on the design studio or the sort of Model 3 sales page, this is it. So we can see the rear here. This seems to be stamped pieces. If we compare that with the same sort of a render for the Model Y, which of course is cast, this is quite a different look. So, you know, as of right now, because no mention of that and because of these sort of renders here, right now it kind of looks like no major update to sort of the giga casting strategy on this Model 3. So interesting to see that. I'm not sure, you know, why Tesla didn't opt to go with that for the update, but for whatever reason, that doesn't appear to be the case yet. Obviously, we'll very much look forward to teardowns from Monroe and Associates and similar. So we'll look out for that. CarWow did say that this does have the same motor and same batteries, but the range did increase, which we'll talk about. CarWow said that there's an 8% improved efficiency. When they said that, I'm not sure if they're talking about an increase in range or if they're truly talking about efficiency in terms of, you know, watt hours per mile or watt hours per kilometer. So, you know, we'll have to kind of keep our eyes out and try to learn more about that. But one of the things driving the improvement in efficiency is the aerodynamic construction of the vehicle. So CarWow mentioned that this is a 2.19 CD versus 0.219 CD versus 0.225 previously, mentioning that this is the lowest coefficient of drag for any Tesla vehicle that is on offer right now. So that's helping drive the improvement in efficiency. I would imagine that the shorter and longer layout also is helping drive that CD down. As for range, this is a little bit confusing. So right now, the website for Tesla in Australia, which has been updated to Project Highland. We're not seeing it yet in North America, at least as soon as I started recording this. We'll see when Tesla does that. But you can see here, 629 kilometers is the listed WLTP range. If we look at the Wayback Machine, so we'll go into the design studio here, you can see we'll get a long range, 629 kilometers. If we go back to the Wayback Machine, I couldn't get it to work for China, but for Australia, if we go to the long range, it looks like previously that was 602 kilometers. Similarly, for the rear-wheel drive, it looks like previously this was 491 kilometers versus the new Model 3 now listed at 513 kilometers. So for both of those in Australia, that looks to be a 4.5% increase in range. Obviously, that's a little bit lower than this 8% efficiency that has been mentioned. I've seen some sites list the range increase as 11%. As a part of Tesla's little press tour, they did have a lot of slides going through updated information about the new Model 3. So I don't know if maybe some of these figures came from that. But right now, at least what I'm seeing in the configuration or design studio in Australia is about a 4.5% increase in range. Now, I did want to check that against the design studio in China. Unfortunately, I couldn't really get a good handle on this. You can see this is a CLTC test standard. So worth mentioning that, you know, for Australia, this is WLTP. Both of these are going to be different and higher than what an EPA test cycle would indicate. So something to keep in mind, WLTP, it's usually 1.11 or 1.12 is kind of what you divide by to get the EPA equivalent. So we'll talk about that in a second. But for CLTC, the rear-wheel drive standard range is 606 kilometers, the long range 713 kilometers. Now, I tried to do the Wayback Machine for China too. You can see this is kind of the results I got. Not super clear, but what I was able to find is that at least some versions were listed at 675 kilometers. There was another at 556. Tried to put that in the translation, Google Translate here. So 556, 675 was the CLTC that was coming up on the Wayback Machine. So with that, I think those were increases of, let me see, I didn't have that in my sheet, but I think I got it written down here. So the 556, which I'm guessing before was the rear-wheel drive standard range version. The tricky thing about this is I'm not sure which wheels these would have, because again, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on that page. But 556 to where the listing is now at 606, that is a plus 9% increase. And then for the long range, 675 to 713. Again, if that's what it was, hopefully someone can double check that, but that would be a 5.5% increase. So those would differ from, again, the 4.5% increases that we seem to be seeing here in Australia. So I think the jury is still out on exactly what these range increases are. If you guys have any, additional insight on that, again, this is just coming out right now. Please feel free to share that in the chat or in the comments today. Now, additionally, I looked up you can see if we go all the way to the bottom here, a lot of great new videos and things like that. I would recommend just kind of checking out these pages. But if we go down and look at the specifications for the rear wheel drive, we can see that the max charging rate is still 170 kilowatts. So this is the same as it was previously on the standard range version, even though there's a little bit more range here. So in theory, could potentially, charge a little bit higher rate at the lower state of charge. Although that could be offset if the pack size isn't necessarily any bigger. So anyway, a little bit in the weeds, but 170 kilowatt max there. And if we look at the long range, this is 250 kilowatt max for charging. So those are both still the same, at least in terms of how they are being listed right now. And there's also obviously no performance version, not one in China, not one in Australia. So we'll see. There had been some rumors of, a Plaid Model 3. Those were probably just rumors of people trying to get ahead of it in case there were, just kind of trying to lucky guess it, but we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a performance, at least at some point. Why Tesla would choose to not release that yet. If there is one, I'm not sure, but at least right now, not one being offered. All right, so pricing and sales. So in Europe and China, it looks like this is going to be available in October. Tesla's obviously got to ramp this up. I would imagine that if it's available in both Europe and China in October, what Tesla will probably do is take that first production that will likely be occurring here basically right now in September. They'll probably take that, export that, and then that can hit in Europe in October, and then they can switch over in October to also start delivering these updated Model 3s in China. That would kind of be my best guess on Tesla's sort of allocation strategy based on the delivery timelines that we're seeing. Let's see if I can translate this, that might help. I'm maybe covering that, but you can see it says estimated delivery date here, the fourth quarter. So similar for Europe, but if we look at Australia, we're looking at January to March 2024. So Q1 estimate for Australia. Again, we haven't seen the update in North America yet, so we'll continue to keep an eye out for that. And then finally, in terms of pricing, so from CarWow, they said that this is going to start around 42,000 pounds in the UK, or wherever pounds are. Sorry, I know that's a ridiculous question for me to have, but and then 42,500 euros for Automoto.it is what they said in their video for Europe. And then in China, it is at 260,000 RMB. So that's actually a 12% increase from the previous pricing, which started at 231,000 or 232,000 RMB. And that's equivalent to just under 36,000 US dollars, again, for this base vehicle. The long range version would start just above $40,000 equivalent in RMB. So interesting to see a little bit of a price increase. Obviously, there were rumors about it coming in at a price under 200,000 RMB, which would have been around $28,000. I think we should have been very skeptical of that, given what we know about Tesla's plans for the next generation vehicle to kind of fall into that price bucket. Maybe people are referring to what Tesla's cost would be. That would be something that I could see being reasonable. Because again, I think there's a lot of things in here that Tesla is probably doing to make this a more easily manufactured and cheaper to manufacture vehicle. So a lot to go through there. I definitely welcome people's thoughts in the comments, and I'll take a look here in the live stream and just kind of see, again, hopefully we haven't missed too much. Well, before I do that though, I do want to just make a quick point outside of Project Highland. We do have a little bit of other news today. On the Cybertruck, some new photos of what appears to be a release candidate Cybertruck. And most interestingly, there's a label here, which I'll try to zoom in on. And you can see that the variant on the sticker here, which lists the VIN, is indicating that this is a dual motor Cybertruck. So obviously we don't know exactly what configurations might be available at launch. Tesla talked about single, dual, and triple motor at the release event, and then Elon eventually talked about a quad motor replacing triple motor. We've had some reports that has now flipped back, so we'll see. But interesting to see this apparent release candidate version listed as a dual motor vehicle. All right, so exciting day. I mean, just overall, I think there's still some things we need to learn about exact pricing, timing, obviously cost of the vehicle to produce, but it is nice to see the Model 3 updated. We've been waiting a long time for this since we've, initially heard these rumors. I think that's, probably at least 6 months, maybe a year ago at this point. So it's been rumored for a long time. I think, although it's probably not been a huge impact to Tesla sales for the Model 3 kind of earlier on in that window, there are people that certainly would be holding off. And the closer and more loud these rumors have gotten, I think that's also going to create the same effect. Now, obviously, with this update, we're going to be in that period right now where people aren't going to really want the old Model 3s. We did just see discounts hit the inventory vehicles for Model 3 yesterday. That seemed a little bit more significant than what they were previously. It's always a little bit hard to tell based on different specific locations. But it does seem that Tesla did add some discounts, which no surprise as we see, the new Model 3 update today. So as Tesla ramps up production for this, first in Giga Shanghai and probably also simultaneously, but I would imagine a little bit later since we haven't seen the North America announcement yet, that's going to both impact the production rate and also, their ability to sell the current Model 3, which they'll then need to lower prices on that until they can clear it. And that's potentially going to affect margins in two ways, both production downtime, meaning less units, meaning higher cost per unit for their actual production, and of course fewer vehicles produced means fewer vehicles sold, while also struggling to potentially sell these at a decent price. So a long way of saying Q3 might be a little bit tough, right? Luckily, we've seen pretty good China numbers so far, so the first couple of months have been, reasonably strong, at least in China. But, this could put a little bit of a challenge on things here in September until Highland really gets ramped up in October. So just something to keep in mind. That doesn't really matter other than to the stock short term, because obviously what happens this quarter has pretty much no bearing at all on what margins would be going forward, which is always why we're looking at that, right? We want to understand how Tesla's costs are coming in, how their sales prices are coming in, so that we can understand where margins might go longer term. But when you have a period of time like this where something so significant is changing that, its influence or projective power on where things end up in the future is quite a bit lower. So just something to keep in mind, but obviously, Wall Street kind of ignores a lot of that stuff sometimes. All right, I'm going to take a look through the comments here. Someone asked hardware 3 or hardware 4. That's a great question. I have not seen any mention of the autopilot hardware. From all the videos that I've watched so far, I was not able to spot a front bumper camera, which we know the Cybertruck has. So that's an interesting question. Some of the rumors suggested that this would be sort of hardware 3.5, which I don't know exactly what that would mean, because I saw some people saying that it's basically hardware 4 without the radar that we know is at least in existence in the S and the X. I'm not sure on the Model Y if that's got the radar or not, but it's a little bit unclear, at least to my knowledge right now, whether or not this is hardware 3, 3.5, 4, or what exactly is going on. I would be surprised if Tesla has not updated this, but I'm also a little bit surprised that it's not updated casting, so I guess I can't necessarily rule anything out. Does it have steer-by-wire? No information that I've seen on that. Again, if someone has more information, feel free to let me know, but I have not seen information on steer-by-wire as of yet. Model Y refresh. So obviously that's what people are going to wonder now, and that's going to put a little bit of pressure too on Model Y until we see a similar refresh. Obviously there's the Project Juniper is kind of what the supposed name of a similar refresh for Model Y might be. From what we have heard from those rumors, it sounds like that wouldn't be until next year. So, Tesla's not going to completely shut down production lines on Model 3 and Model Y at the same time. It makes sense to stagger them, but obviously it makes things a little bit tricky in this interim period of time. What changes make it a better robotaxi? So, obviously cost, I would assume, is quite a bit lower, cost to manufacture. I think the rear screen is definitely an addition that is nice for a robotaxi type of a situation. I would imagine that, you know, again, we just talked about hardware. My guess is that that is probably updated, although we're not clear on that yet. Beyond that, though, you know, I guess can read through some of the changes here, but I think a lot of these just make it a better vehicle, right? Like whether it's a driving vehicle or a robotaxi, I think there's just, you know, a big long bolded list here of things that make this a better car, which I think is exciting, and obviously that translates, you know, whether it's a vehicle that you're driving or a vehicle that's driving you. All right, just kind of reading through. Thank you all for your patience as I just sit here and read stuff, especially the audio listeners. All right. Somebody said it's not 1 inch shorter, it's 0.1 inches shorter. I got that from an Inside EVs article, so either I misread it, or they misstated it, or this comment is wrong. More likely one of the former two options. But could be a little bit shorter, somewhere between a tenth and a full inch. Performance stats we didn't talk about too much in terms of like acceleration or top speed. Those largely look to be the same. We can see here, that's actually the long range stats. We'll flip over to Australia since that's not getting affected by the translation. So you can see rear wheel drive is 6.1 second, 0 to 100 kilometers, 62 miles per hour. And the long range 4.4, so 0 to 60, you know, you might shave a tenth of a second off of those. Top speed, it looks like actually did maybe come down a bit, at least in the Australia design studio. It looked like that was 225 kilometers per hour before and 233 for the dual motor. It looks like both of these have been reduced to 201 kilometers per hour for, you know, whatever reason. But top speed does look to be a bit reduced. Acceleration, though, largely looks similar. And again, CarWow did say same motors, same batteries. Obviously, the range has improved a bit. You know, we don't know if these are truly the same batteries, or maybe they were referring to it being the same sort of battery chemistry or battery cell in terms of it being 2170s and LFP, you know, batteries for the standard range. So I think one of the rumors we had going into Highland was that it would be an updated battery, potentially using a new battery, at least for the standard range from CATL, but no indication at least of that so far, other than potentially a little bit higher range, although again, similar, at least in Australia's design studio, similar increase for both rear wheel and long range. All right. Apparently there is a front bumper cam, Rob. All right, so I don't know. Can we see that? And it looks like maybe there's, kind of looks like there's one hiding there. You guys see that? It does kind of look like one. I don't know if we get any better shots of that anywhere. But yeah, it does kind of look like there's a front bumper camera there. I don't think we get any better shots. I doubt there will be any in here that we can kind of see of that. Maybe strategically hidden. Ah, there we go. Yeah, you can see it right there. We'll have to wait for that to come back. But definitely looks like there is the front bumper camera, which is definitely nice to see. There are no ultrasonic sensors here, which you can see from just looking at the front fascia. And with the front bumper camera, that should make the performance of Tesla Vision, yep, there it is. That should make the performance of Tesla Vision much more effective in terms of replacing those ultrasonic sensors. So really glad to see that. I think that also makes it much more likely that this is more of a hardware 4 type of vehicle, or maybe hardware 3.5 if you want to consider no radar, which was kind of the rumor we heard, as being not truly hardware 4. To me, that seems like a bit of a misnomer. But obviously we'll just have to kind of wait and see on what that will be. New headlight technology. So headlights is not something that I know a lot about. Unfortunately, I think I've read that these are matrix LED headlights, which probably means something to a lot of people. But I also heard from, I think CarWow mentioned that there's a little bit more dynamic control with the headlights, the projector part of the headlight, in terms of being able to react to traffic that's oncoming. So instead of just high beams being sort of a binary situation, if I was understanding what they were saying correctly, it sounds like that's a little bit more adaptive and dynamic based on what the car is seeing in terms of its environment. So again, not an area that I'm an expert in, but that's kind of what my understanding is from what I've heard so far. Do you think this changes position this vehicle better in relation to upcoming compact? Yeah, so I think there are a number of different things here that make the vehicle a little bit better, a little bit more elevated. You've got the rear screen, you've got the ventilated, perforated seats, the LED lighting. These are things that we may not see the sort of next generation vehicle have that could differentiate it a little bit, kind of like we have seen those features to an extent differentiate the S and the X from the 3 and the Y. So with Tesla starting to bring some of those a little bit further down market, it does create maybe a little bit more of a differentiation from what Tesla may have with a smaller compact vehicle, in addition, of course, to the size and all the stuff, performance and things like that. Powered frunk, not sure. Haven't seen anything on that, so my guess would be probably not. What currency? So this is the Australian design studio. If anyone was looking at the prices, hopefully that was clear, but yeah, these are Australian dollars, not USD. So yeah, don't get tripped up by that. We don't know the pricing for the North American updates yet. Audio's low. Sorry about that if that's low. I feel like I'm talking a little bit low. All right. Seems like that's probably most of the questions. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. But yeah, pretty exciting day. I think how exciting is to be determined because I think a lot of what's really exciting here doesn't come across from these nice videos that we see on the website. Like I think the update looks great. But what I'd probably be most excited about from a business standpoint is what Tesla's really been able to do with the manufacturing process, what they've been able to do with the the construction of the vehicle, and how that affects the costs. Because I think that's again got to have been a top priority with this redesign. If you've got an opportunity like this where you are redesigning the vehicle to a significant extent, Tesla's going to take full advantage of that opportunity to implement cost savings as well. With the potential caveat of, I would be curious to hear a little bit more about what's going on with the castings and why that wasn't implemented. Maybe Tesla just didn't really feel like it was worth the change to the production lines for the savings that they would get and the cost that maybe they would have to bear in terms of the production rate to get that up to speed, etc. So interesting decision nonetheless, and hopefully we hear a little bit more from Tesla on that at some point. All right. That is going to wrap it up then. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on X at Tesla Podcast. And we'll see you tomorrow for the Friday, September 1st episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.